Hello everyone. A public betrayal is about to become justice. Subscribe, and now begin. Remove her name before she arrives, Evan Caldwell said. Tonight, the world meets my future. Natalie heard the sentence through the open limousine door. For one suspended second, she remained seated beneath the soft interior light, 8 months pregnant, one hand resting beneath the curve of her belly, while the other held an ivory invitation printed with 2 names. Evan and Natalie Caldwell. Outside, flashbulbs burst across the Beverly Hills night like silent lightning. Reporters shouted. Music rolled from the ballroom entrance. Everything looked beautiful. That was what made the betrayal feel so cruel. Natalie stepped onto the red carpet in the champagne-colored gown Evan had chosen for her that morning. He had told her they needed to appear united. He had promised to meet her at the entrance. Instead, he stood beneath a wall of gold lights with actress Camille Stone pressed against his side. His hand rested at Camille's waist. Her smile belonged to a woman who believed the ending had already been written. Then Natalie saw the necklace. A blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, glowing against Camille's skin. Eleanor Caldwell's necklace. Evan's late mother had worn it at every company anniversary until the year she died. It had disappeared from the family's safe 3 nights earlier. Evan blamed the staff. Now it hung around another woman's throat. The baby kicked sharply. Natalie drew a careful breath. Across the carpet, Evan noticed her. For an instant, something like discomfort passed through his expression. Then the cameras turned, and the mask returned. "Mr. Caldwell," a reporter called. "Is this your first official appearance with Camille Stone?" Evan smiled. "This is our first honest appearance." The crowd leaned closer. Natalie stopped 10 feet away. Camille tilted her head with practiced elegance. "Evan and I have spent months building something meaningful," she said. "Professionally and personally. Months." The word entered Natalie like cold air. Evan had missed prenatal appointments, foundation meetings, and the night their daughter first moved strongly enough for him to feel. Every absence now had a face. "And your marriage?" another reporter asked. Evan looked directly at Natalie. "My marriage ended long before tonight." Phones lifted around them. Somewhere, a camera zoomed toward Natalie's hand protecting her stomach. Evan stepped closer, lowering his voice while keeping his smile. "Do not make this difficult. Sign the papers tomorrow, and you will be comfortable." Natalie's blue-gray eyes held his. "Comfortable. The child will be provided for. She is your daughter." His jaw tightened. "This is not the place." Natalie looked toward Camille's necklace. "You made it the place." Camille gave a quiet laugh. "Some women do not know when their part is over." The insult landed softly, almost beautifully. Natalie's fingers tightened around the invitation until the thick paper bent. Evan leaned toward the nearest microphone. "Camille represents the future of Caldwell Pictures, and, I hope, the future of the Caldwell family." Then applause began near the entrance. Not excited applause. Nervous applause. The kind powerful people offered when someone more powerful had arrived. Conversations died one by one. Jonathan Caldwell stood at the far end of the carpet, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, and motionless beneath the lights. In one hand, he carried a black envelope sealed with the Caldwell crest. His steel blue eyes moved from Camille's necklace to Natalie's face, then settled on his son. Evan recovered first. "Dad, I can explain." Jonathan walked toward him slowly. "Before this night ends, Evan, you will explain what you signed." He raised the envelope just enough for Evan to read the words printed across its front. "Emergency Board Resolution." And for the first time that evening, Evan Caldwell stopped smiling. 72 hours earlier, Natalie Caldwell had been standing barefoot in the nursery when the doorbell rang. Morning light spilled through the Century City penthouse, warming the pale wooden crib and the row of tiny dresses hanging inside an open closet. Above the changing table, silver letters spelled the name she had chosen for her daughter, Eleanor Grace. Evan had approved it through a text message. He had not attended the appointment where they learned the baby was a girl. "1 minute," Natalie called, folding a white blanket over her arm. The man outside wore a gray suit and carried a thick legal envelope. "Mrs. Caldwell." "Yes." "You have been served." The words were quiet. The damage was not. Natalie closed the door and remained in the marble foyer, staring at her name printed across the envelope. Her daughter shifted beneath her ribs, one slow movement that made Natalie place a protective hand over her belly. "We are all right," she whispered. Then she opened it. The first page was a petition for divorce. The second required her to leave the penthouse within 48 hours. The third offered $2 million if she signed a confidentiality agreement and surrendered every claim connected to Caldwell Pictures. There was also a clause forbidding her from discussing any strategy, contract, financial model, or investor presentation she had created during the marriage. 6 years of work had been reduced to information she was no longer allowed to admit existed. Natalie read each page twice. She did not cry. Not yet. The elevator doors opened behind her. Evan entered wearing a navy suit, followed by Camille Stone in oversized sunglasses and a cream designer coat. Neither looked surprised to find Natalie holding the papers. "You brought her here?" Natalie asked. Evan removed his watch and placed it on the console table. "Camille needs to see the apartment before the premiere." "Why?" Camille glanced toward the nursery. "Because I may be spending more time in Los Angeles." Natalie looked at Evan. "She already lives in Los Angeles." Camille smiled. "Not here." The meaning settled into the room. Evan walked past Natalie as though she were a guest who had overstayed. "The settlement is generous," he said. "Sign it, and this can remain private. You filed for divorce without speaking to me. We have been speaking for months. You simply refused to hear me." Natalie held up the papers. "You mean while I was preparing your investor reports? Or while I was carrying your daughter?" Evan's expression hardened. "The child will be provided for. She is not an expense. Do not make this emotional." Camille moved toward the nursery doorway, examining the room as if measuring it for renovation. "The space could become a beautiful dressing room," she said. Natalie's hand closed around the envelope. "Get out." Evan stepped between them. "You will not speak to her that way." Natalie stared at the man she had married. "You brought your mistress into our daughter's room. Camille is part of my future." His voice was calm, almost bored. "You are not." He placed another document on the table. "Sign this as well." Natalie read the heading. It purported to waive her authority over a trust created for their unborn child. At the bottom was her signature, perfectly copied, but she had never signed it. Beneath that page was a second authorization transferring $5 million from the Eleanor Caldwell Foundation. The approval also carried her name. Natalie looked up slowly. Evan had not only prepared to leave her. He had prepared to make her responsible for the money he stole. 6 years earlier, Caldwell Pictures had been 21 days from collapse. The glass offices still shone above Los Angeles. The lobby still displayed framed posters of award-winning films. But behind the polished doors, advertisers were leaving, production debts were growing, and Evan Caldwell had begun blaming everyone except himself. Natalie found him alone in a conference room at 2 a.m, staring at a presentation filled with expensive graphics and no workable strategy. They had been married for 8 months. He looked younger then. Frightened, too. "My father was right," Evan whispered. "I am going to lose the company." Natalie placed her handbag on the floor, removed her heels, and opened the financial reports. She did not promise him everything would be fine. She told him exactly what was broken. Caldwell Pictures was spending millions on prestige films while ignoring the audience moving toward streaming. Its advertisers were not leaving because the company lacked fame. They were leaving because Evan had no reliable data, no long-term distribution plan, and no reason for investors to trust him. Natalie worked until sunrise. She rebuilt the presentation, designed a subscription strategy, identified 3 departments that could be restructured without mass layoffs, and created a financing model that would keep the company alive for 18 months. 3 days later, Evan presented her work to the board. He never mentioned her name. Jonathan approved the rescue package. Investors applauded. Entertainment magazines called Evan Caldwell the visionary who saved his family's studio. Natalie watched from the back of the room and told herself marriage was not a competition. His success was their success. That belief became the first thing he learned to exploit. Over the next 5 years, Natalie negotiated advertising agreements, repaired failed campaigns, and stopped Evan from buying a production company hiding nearly $80 million in debt. She created the Eleanor Caldwell Foundation and built its first legal assistance program for single mothers facing eviction. Evan appeared at every press conference. Natalie wrote every speech. "You are better at the work," he once told her, kissing her forehead. "I am better at making people believe it was mine." He laughed. Natalie laughed with him. Now, sitting alone in the nursery with the forged authorization open on her laptop, She understood that it had never been a joke. Evan had trained himself to take her ideas, her labor, and her silence. Pregnancy only gave him a reason to erase her completely. 3 months after Natalie announced she was expecting, he stopped inviting her to meetings. He told the board she needed rest. He told investors she had become emotional. He told Natalie that powerful men did not want financial advice from a woman distracted by prenatal appointments. She opened her archived files and followed the missing $5 million. The transfer moved first into a consulting company registered in Nevada, then through a production services firm with no employees, before arriving at an account controlled by Camille Stone's film company. Natalie kept searching. A second document appeared. A $35 million production guarantee had already been placed in escrow using forged approvals. At midnight after the premiere, the funds would be released automatically unless the board froze them. Her breathing changed. Evan was not simply financing his mistress's film. He was using Natalie's signature to make her responsible when the transaction was discovered. Then she opened the file history. The original creator was Evan Ross Caldwell. The final approval had been uploaded from his private account. And under shared access appeared one more name. Camille Avery Stone. The first contraction came while Natalie was copying the escrow records onto an encrypted drive. It began as a hard pressure beneath her ribs, then tightened around her abdomen until the nursery seemed to tilt. The laptop slid from her knees. "Not yet," she whispered, pressing both hands over the curve of her belly. Eleanor Grace kicked once, sharp and frightened. Natalie waited for the pain to pass. It did. 11 minutes later, another contraction came. Evan had already canceled her access to the family driver. When she called his phone, it went directly to voicemail. She did not leave a message. She placed the forged documents, the encrypted drive, and her medical card inside a canvas bag, then requested a car to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Rain blurred the lights along Wilshire Boulevard. Every stoplight felt longer than the last. Every movement from the baby became a question Natalie was afraid to answer. In the emergency department, nurses guided her beneath bright clinical lights and placed 2 monitors across her stomach. One tracked the contractions. The other filled the room with her daughter's heartbeat. "Fast, steady, alive. You are having premature contractions," the obstetrician said after examining her. "The baby is stable, but your body is responding to severe stress. You need rest, limited movement, and no air travel. If the pain returns or becomes regular, you come back immediately." Natalie almost laughed. Her marriage, home, finances, and reputation had collapsed before lunch, yet the doctor spoke of avoiding stress as if it were a door she could simply close. Her phone vibrated on the bedside table. News photographs showed Evan and Camille rehearsing for the premiere. One article described them as Hollywood's most exciting new power couple. Another called Natalie his estranged wife, though she had discovered the estrangement only hours earlier. The door opened. Jonathan Caldwell entered alone, his silver hair damp from the rain, his charcoal suit missing its usual perfection. Months earlier, after Evan ignored 2 urgent calls from her obstetrician, Natalie had reluctantly listed Jonathan as her secondary emergency contact. Tonight, that decision had reached him before his son did. "I spoke only with the nurse after they received your permission," Jonathan said. "A private room is available upstairs." Natalie looked at him. "I did not request one. You require better care. I require the men in your family to stop deciding what I require." His expression tightened, but she continued. "Your son controlled my work, my money, and now the story of my marriage. I will not let his father control what happens next." Silence settled between them. Jonathan looked at the monitors, then at the canvas bag containing the evidence. Finally, he nodded. Understood. He left the room and sat in the hallway. He remained there through the night. No lawyers. No calls to the press. No attempt to purchase obedience. By dawn, the contractions had stopped. The doctor approved Natalie's discharge under strict instructions, and Jonathan was still waiting in the same chair, his cane resting against one knee. "I knew you were saving his company," he admitted. "I recognized your work in every plan Evan presented." Natalie's eyes hardened. "And you allowed him to take the credit. I thought success would make him worthy of it." "Your silence did not make him stronger," she said. "It taught him someone else would always pay." Jonathan lowered his gaze. Then he reached inside his coat and placed a small brass key in her palm. My wife left instructions before she died, he said. Instructions Evan has never seen. The key felt cold against Natalie's skin. What does it open? Jonathan looked toward the bag of forged documents. The reason my son was never guaranteed my empire. By 9 the next morning, Natalie no longer looked like a woman waiting to be rescued. She looked like someone preparing to prove a crime. Rebecca Sloan covered the glass conference table with bank records, trust documents, internal emails, and copies of the forged approvals. Marcus Bennett stood before 3 wall screens, tracing the missing money through a network of shell companies created to hide its final destination. Jonathan remained near the windows, silent beneath the pale Los Angeles sky. The $5 million left the foundation first, Marcus said. It moved through 2 consulting firms, then into Camille Stone's production company. Rebecca opened another folder. And every authorization carries Natalie's signature. Natalie studied the imitation of her name. Evan had copied the upward curve of the N, the small space before Caldwell, even the pressure mark she always left beneath the final letter. He had studied her carefully enough to erase her. That hurt more than the affair. Marcus changed the screen. Private flights appeared. Hotel suites. Jewelry purchases. A Beverly Hills lease paid through Caldwell Pictures. The sapphire necklace Evan placed around Camille's throat had not been the only gift financed with company money. There is more, Rebecca said. She handed Natalie a communications file labeled Natalie Containment Strategy. Inside were edited videos, anonymous statements, and talking points describing her as unstable, jealous, and emotionally compromised by pregnancy. Evan had prepared reporters to question her judgment before auditors discovered the missing funds. He was not simply leaving her. He was manufacturing a version of her no one would trust. Jonathan's hand tightened around his cane. Activate the amendment now. Natalie did not look up. Not yet. He intended to destroy you. Then he should explain that intention in front of everyone he expected to believe it. Marcus connected an encrypted drive to the central screen. We recovered a fragment from the server cache. 90 seconds. The original was recorded on another device. A voice filled the room. Evans. Calm. Amused. Once Natalie signs, every missing dollar becomes her problem. Camille answered. And if she refuses? Then the press makes sure no one believes her. The recording continued with Evan describing pregnancy as useful because tears could be edited into evidence of instability. Then the audio cut off. The recording also mentioned the escrow package. Evan claimed the bank would rely on documents bearing Natalie's name, but Marcus pointed out that a transaction of that size normally required several layers of review. Someone had fabricated not only Natalie's signature, but also a committee consent and a legal certification. That made the plan more serious and, at the same time, easier to test through forensic records. Silence settled across the room. Rebecca closed her pen. This fragment supports an emergency injunction. We can freeze the escrow immediately. No, Natalie said. Marcus turned. The money releases tomorrow night. The board resolution will freeze it before midnight. Until then, Evan must believe his plan is untouched. Jonathan watched her carefully. You want him comfortable. I want him careless. Natalie moved toward the screen and studied the waveform. He said more than this. The rest is not on our system, Marcus replied. Whoever recorded it kept the original. Natalie's phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message appeared. I have all 24 minutes. What will you give me? Beneath the words was a photograph of Camille wearing Eleanor's sapphire necklace. Rebecca read over Natalie's shoulder. She wants protection. Jonathan's expression hardened. Pay her. Natalie locked the screen. No, that recording could end this. Then she can release it because it is true. She gathered the files into one stack. I will not buy honesty from the woman who helped him bury it. Another message arrived. Midnight. Beverly, Wilshire. Come alone. Natalie placed one hand over her daughter as a slow movement passed beneath her palm. Camille had the missing confession. But she also had something more dangerous. The chance to decide which side of the lie would survive. The Beverly Wilshire suite was designed for secrets. Thick curtains covered the windows, the lights were low, and an untouched bottle of champagne rested beside 2 crystal glasses. Camille Stone sat alone near the fireplace, wearing a black silk dress and Eleanor Caldwell's sapphire necklace. Her phone lay on the table between them. You came alone, Camille said. Natalie closed the door behind her. You asked me to. 8 months pregnant and recently discharged from the hospital. She moved carefully, but nothing in her expression invited pity. Camille studied her for several seconds. You look calmer than I expected. You expected me to beg. Most women would. Natalie placed a folder beside the phone. Most women do not arrive with your financial records. Camille's confidence shifted. Only slightly. The recording is 24 minutes, she said. Evan explains the transfers, the forged approvals, and what he planned to do after the premiere. What do you want? $5 million and written protection from the company. Natalie opened the folder. I cannot promise immunity. Then promise money. No, Camille's smile disappeared. You need that recording. You need to understand what is in this folder. The first document was the stock agreement Evan had given Camille. It promised her a board seat and voting shares in Caldwell Global. Rebecca had marked every clause that Evan lacked the authority to approve. The second document traced foundation money into Camille's production company. The third contained internal emails prepared for after the film's release. Camille read quickly at first, then more slowly. This cannot be real. It is. Natalie turned to the final page. Evan had drafted a statement blaming Camille for the missing funds. He planned to describe her as an unstable actress who manipulated him, forged documents, and exploited his failing marriage. He said the shares were already his, Camille whispered. They were never his. He said Jonathan approved our relationship. Jonathan did not know your name until 3 weeks ago. Camille looked down at the sapphire necklace. For the first time, it appeared less like a prize and more like evidence. Evan told me your marriage had been over for 2 years, she said. He said you used the pregnancy to keep him. Natalie's voice remained quiet. You knew he was married. I believed what was useful. Then answer for that. Camille looked up sharply. Do not pretend you are innocent. You helped build his company. You protected him. I did. Natalie did not defend herself. And I am answering for the years I stayed silent. The honesty unsettled Camille more than anger would have. Natalie pushed the folder closer. You did not know he planned to bury both of us. But you knew enough to record him. Camille's fingers moved toward the phone. I recorded everyone. That is how women survive in Hollywood. Then decide what surviving means tonight. Camille stood. If I release this, my career is finished. If you hide it, you may become part of the fraud. So you came here to threaten me? I came to give you the choice Evan never gave either of us. Natalie moved toward the door. Walk onto that stage and tell the truth yourself. Or stand beside him while the evidence tells it for you. And what do I receive? Natalie turned back. The chance to stop becoming the person he expected you to be. She left without touching the phone. Alone, Camille stared at the closed door. Then she played the final 6 minutes of the recording, the section she had never heard. Evan laughed as he described blaming everything on her once the film was released. The public already expects actresses to be unstable, he said. Camille's face went still. Slowly, she unclasped Eleanor's sapphire necklace and placed it beside the phone. For the first time that night, she understood she had never been Evan's future. She had only been his next victim. Earlier that afternoon, Natalie had returned to Cedars-Sinai for another examination. The contractions had stopped, her blood pressure was stable, and the fetal monitoring was reassuring. Her doctor did not encourage a public confrontation, but after Natalie explained that the venue was only minutes away, they agreed on strict limits. She would remain at the event briefly, avoid prolonged standing, keep a car waiting, and return immediately if symptoms resumed. A nurse chosen by Natalie waited in a private room near the ballroom. Jonathan offered additional security. Natalie accepted only enough to protect the evidence and keep reporters from blocking her exit. Before leaving the hospital, she stood beside the window and watched afternoon light move across Los Angeles. She did not feel fearless. Fearless people belonged in speeches. Real courage was quieter. It was knowing exactly what could go wrong and taking every reasonable step to protect the child who had no choice in the matter. Natalie placed both hands over her belly. We are not going there for revenge, she whispered. We are going there so the lie stops. 40 minutes after Jonathan appeared on the red carpet, Evan walked onto the ballroom stage convinced the black envelope was another threat his father would never carry out. Jonathan had rescued him from failed deals, angry investors, and public scandals before. Blood had always protected him. Tonight, Evan believed it would protect him again. Beneath crystal chandeliers, reporters, actors, and board members watched as he placed one hand on Camille's empty chair. "Miss Stone will join us shortly," he said. "But first, there is one personal matter I intend to address." The screen behind him brightened. Natalie appeared in a hospital room, crying beneath fluorescent lights. Another clip showed her raising her voice inside the penthouse. A third showed her gripping a table while 8 months pregnant. Every video had been cut carefully. Fear looked like instability. Pain looked like rage. Evan lowered his voice with practiced sorrow. "My wife has been struggling emotionally. For her health and the safety of our daughter, she has chosen to step away from Caldwell Pictures and from our marriage." The ballroom doors opened. Natalie stood beneath the entrance lights in the ivory gown Evan had selected for her humiliation. Around her neck rested Eleanor Caldwell's sapphire necklace. 20 minutes earlier, a hotel employee had delivered it in a black box without a note. Natalie had understood the message. Camille had made a choice. Cameras turned. Whispers moved through the room. Jonathan entered several steps behind Natalie, carrying the sealed envelope. He did not lead her or offer his arm. This was her evidence. Her name. Her fight. Evan's smile tightened. "You should be resting." Natalie continued toward the stage. "I did." She stopped beside the first row. "Now play the original footage." Evan laughed softly. "This is exactly the behavior I warned everyone about." Rebecca Sloan rose from the board members' table. "The unedited files have been authenticated." Marcus Bennett connected a secure drive to the projection system. The first full video showed Evan blocking the penthouse doorway before Natalie raised her voice. The second showed him demanding she sign documents while she struggled through a contraction. The third revealed that her hospital tears began after she received the forged transfer records. Then the videos disappeared. Financial statements filled the screen. $5 million from the Eleanor Caldwell Foundation. 2 shell companies. 1 production account controlled by Camille Stone. The escrow agreement appeared next. $35 million scheduled for automatic release at midnight. Evan pointed toward Natalie. She approved every transaction. Rebecca held up the original documents. Her signature was forged. Marcus displayed the file history, created by Evan Ross Caldwell, uploaded through his private executive account, shared with Camille Avery Stone. Marcus cautioned the room that access alone did not prove she understood the fraud. The emails and recording would determine what she knew and when she knew it. The room changed. Whispers became silence. Jonathan stepped onto the stage and opened the black envelope. Rebecca addressed the board. "The independent directors received the authenticated files through secure counsel this afternoon. A majority has signed an emergency resolution. Trust Council has also confirmed that the Caldwell Family Trust Amendment may be activated under its incapacity and misconduct provision. The resolution becomes effective upon that activation." Evan turned toward his father. "You cannot choose her over your own son." Jonathan's steel blue eyes did not move. "I am not choosing her over my son. I am choosing the truth over the man my son decided to become." He signed the activation page. Temporary voting control passed to Natalie Grace Caldwell. The board resolution took effect immediately. Evan was suspended as chief executive officer. His system access was terminated. The escrow account was frozen, and every financial record was placed under forensic review. Evan stared at Natalie as if she had become someone new. She had not. He had simply never looked closely enough. "She manipulated you," he shouted. "She used the baby to steal my company." Natalie stepped toward the microphone. "I never asked for your company. I asked you not to steal from women who needed help." Evan opened his mouth. A woman's voice stopped him. "She is telling the truth." Camille emerged from the side entrance, pale but composed. She placed her phone on the podium between them. Evan's face emptied. "What are you doing?" Camille looked at the sapphire necklace around Natalie's throat, then back at the man who had lied to them both. "Answering for my choice." She pressed play. Evan's voice filled the ballroom before his confession did. At first, he sounded amused. "Once Natalie signs the settlement, every missing dollar becomes her problem." Then came the rest. He described the forged approvals, the shell companies, and the plan to remove Jonathan from the board after securing control of the family shares. He laughed about using Camille's fame to attract investors, then abandoning her once the film received distribution. 24 minutes. That was how long it took Evan Ross Caldwell to destroy the man he had spent 38 years pretending to be. No one interrupted the recording. Not the reporters. Not the investors. Not even Jonathan. When the final sentence ended, the silence felt heavier than any verdict. Evan reached for the phone, but corporate security stepped between him and Camille. "You recorded me," he whispered. Camille's face remained still beneath the ballroom lights. "Because I never trusted you. You knew about the money. I knew you were hiding something. I did not know you were stealing from women who needed legal help." Rebecca approached the stage with 2 forensic auditors retained by the board. "Mr. Caldwell, all financial records are now under preservation order. You are required to surrender every company device and access credential." Evan turned toward Jonathan. "Dad." The words sounded small now. For years, Jonathan had rescued his son from failed deals, reckless decisions, and public embarrassment. Each rescue had been called love. Now he understood it had only delayed the consequence. "You used this family name as a shield," Jonathan said. "Tonight, it becomes evidence." No one arrested Evan on the stage, and Rebecca refused to describe the recording as a final verdict. The board's authority was limited to protecting the company, suspend access, preserve devices, freeze the disputed escrow, and retain independent auditors. Whether Evan had committed crimes would be determined only after the records were authenticated and reviewed by the appropriate authorities. Natalie wanted accountability, not theater pretending to be law. Camille's role was treated with the same care. Her name in a shared access log showed that documents had been available to her. It did not, by itself, prove that she understood the forged approvals. Her recorded questions, emails, financial benefits, and later cooperation would establish what responsibility belonged to her. Natalie did not excuse Camille's choices, but neither would she invent guilt simply because the crowd wanted another villain. By midnight, the recording had spread across every major news platform. Millions watched the moment Jonathan activated the trust amendment and the board suspended his only son. But Natalie did not celebrate. 3 days later, she filed for divorce. She rejected Evan's private offer of $10 million and refused the confidentiality agreement his attorneys placed before her. The escrowed production funds remained frozen, and the foundation's missing money was recovered during the forensic review. Camille lost 2 film contracts. She returned every payment her company had received and agreed to cooperate with investigators. It was not redemption. It was responsibility. 6 weeks later, after considering the parents' conduct, housing, caregiving plans, and the child's immediate welfare, the family court granted Natalie temporary primary physical custody. Evan received a structured visitation schedule subject to further review. She spent the final weeks of her pregnancy rebuilding the Eleanor Caldwell Foundation. Its new program provided emergency housing, financial counseling, and legal representation for women whose partners controlled their money and access to help. Jonathan offered Natalie the executive suite. She chose Eleanor's smaller office instead. When her daughter was born, the first sound Natalie heard was not applause, camera shutters, or courtroom doors. It was a cry. Strong. Alive. She named her Eleanor Grace Caldwell. Jonathan held the baby only after Natalie placed her carefully in his arms. The billionaire who had commanded boardrooms for 40 years looked down at his granddaughter and wept without hiding it. Natalie spent those months separating reform from revenge. She accepted temporary voting authority only while the directors conducted a search for permanent leadership. She hired an independent compliance officer, required dual authorization for foundation transfers, and ordered the studio to preserve authorship records so employees could no longer disappear behind an executive's name. The reforms drew no applause, but they protected people after the scandal faded. Jonathan attended the first governance meeting from an ordinary chair near the end of the table. He apologized for recognizing Natalie's work and allowing Evan to claim it. Natalie accepted the apology without pretending it repaired 6 years. "You cannot change what you permitted," she said. "You can change what this company permits next." Jonathan nodded. At 72, he finally understood that protecting a family name meant allowing the truth to correct it. Months later, Natalie entered what had once been Evan's conference room. His nameplate still rested at the head of the long table. She removed it. Marcus asked whether she wanted her own name placed there. "No," Natalie said. She ordered the table replaced with a round one so no employee could disappear behind another person's title. Jonathan watched from the doorway. "You could inherit all of this someday," he told her. Natalie looked through the glass walls at the people returning to their desks. I never wanted to inherit an empire, she said. I wanted the people inside it to stop paying for the men who controlled it. Evan had spent his life waiting to receive his father's power. Natalie earned the one thing he could never demand, the right to be trusted with it.